Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to our Moving Forward, the State of Humanity Summit, where we'll be discussing racial justice and racial equality, equity rather. My name is Councilwoman Monique Anderson Walker, and I am your County Council Representative in District 8 for Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm very excited that you all are here today, very excited that we are presenting an opportunity to discuss issues that are so prevalent right now, specifically with our racial equity challenges, as well as those challenges that we're having with COVID, because they're so closely related. Thank you again for joining us. I'm particularly excited about this event. My team and I have worked extremely hard to put together something for you that would allow a wonderful platform that you can receive powerful and dynamic information. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate that. Before we begin, and forgive me, I do have a little issue with my throat today. But before we begin, I do want to take a moment to reflect on where we are. This has been a very challenging time for us, not just in the United States of America, but globally. And I think it's important that we recognize the significance of COVID coming into play right at the same time that we're having social injustice issues coming into play. It presents a wonderful opportunity to start moving this paradigm shift forward. A paradigm shift being the aha moment where you realize suddenly that you can do things in a different way. And that's where we are right now with how we function socially, specifically with the injustices that we're seeing. COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to reset, to reevaluate, and to prioritize. I think had we not had a moment to slow down, to stop, we would have probably been distracted as we have been in the past when issues regarding racial justice and injustice come into play. But that's why this is so important, that during this traumatic and impactful time, we were so hyper-focused on the events that transpired as a result of George Floyd's death that we're looking for solutions, great solutions, looking at humanity, looking at how we can work together and not continue to be distracted. I don't think any of us could turn away when we saw the 8 minutes and 46 seconds, if you chose to look at it, of a police officer's knee in the neck of George Floyd as he screamed for his mother, his mom, in the last minutes of his life. It could not be ignored. And as we move forward, it's so important that we have discussions about how we want this new shift to look. And it's going to take all of us to participate together for this. I do want to say that about a month ago, we recognized in our office that people were really struggling during this COVID period, and we decided to launch something called Moving Forward from the shock of our new reality. And in the series of seminars, what we call Lunch and Learns, the first of 5 was focused on mental health, because we believe that mental health is probably one of the more significant challenges that we're going to have moving forward, and that those are things that we need to address. I want to say also, I'm so excited about and proud of our youth that have stepped up during this period of time. There's no question that this paradigm shift, this cultural shift, is going to be led by our youth. We hear all the time they're the leaders of our future. I totally disagree with that. They're our leaders now, and they've proven it. They're out there working, they're out there consistently leading, boldly declaring what they want. They're locking arms with multi-generations, multiracial groups, genders, and bringing this new reality to us. So that's something to be proud about. But that's why we're here this evening, because we really want to discuss some of the perils of and we need an honest and open discussion about the inequities that Black Americans have faced, and looking at how we can take actions to initiate some transformative change so that our world will be a better place. We're blessed to have a wonderful group of people here today to serve as a panelist. They're all rock stars. They are, without question, people who have served and have been instrumental in moving us forward through this period and have been dynamic in their thinking outside of the box to look at new solutions to generation-old problems like racism. I do want to say that as we look forward to finding solutions today, that we continue the conversation and that we recognize this is not just one conversation, this is not just one event. This will be something that we must continue, and we must empower our youth to really push this forward. So I want to thank all of you again for joining us, and I'm honored to have our panelists with us today. They are definitely movers and shakers, so let me introduce the panel to you. We have Mayor Timothy Adams from the City of Ely. We have Ms. Aisha Braveboy, our state's attorney of Prince George's County, Maryland. We have Mr. Will Jawando, council member at large from Montgomery County, Maryland. And I must also add that he's one of my regional partners for #DrivingItHome, which is a safe driving campaign. We also have Mr. Ed Burrows, vice chairman of Prince George's County Board of Education, who's been active ever since he was a student and on the board. And they can't let go of him. He's just so powerful. Like I said, it's the youth that lead us. We have Mr. Justin Hansford, who's a professor of law and executive director of the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center at Howard University. Very excited to have him here too, because he has performed on a national platform with these similar issues, and we're hoping that he can give us some insight as to how we can move forward through this as well. We have Marissa Miles, who's the founder of Resistance Research Coalition and a 2020 graduate of Oxon Hill High School. Congratulations, Marissa, and thank you for being here. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening. She is someone who I consider to be a tremendous voice and a powerful voice for the people. She was the moderator of my first signature event, which was called Wow Factor, Women of Wellness, Women of Wealth, Women of Wholeness, Wow Factor, which we launched May 2019 and focused a lot on the mental health aspect. This has been a theme for us, and we recognize that this is important. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce my good friend and amazing strategist, our moderator for this evening, and District 8's own, Jennifer Jones.
Thank you so much, Monique. It is an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to speak to your audience and to support you in what is another groundbreaking endeavor for Prince George's County. How awesome that council member and councilwoman of District 8 is here leading our community and creating these venues and formats for us to be together. You and your team, Gina Anderson Ford and the Orange Crush team there in District 8 in your office have done a phenomenal job of gathering an eclectic group of dynamic leaders for us to have tonight's conversation. And so I'm honored, privileged, and excited to have the opportunity to be with you. For our audience, I know that there are hundreds of you registered for this Zoom, and we are excited to have the opportunity and privilege to bring to you, moving forward, the state of humanity, equity, is the conversation that we're having tonight. And so we're going to mix it up. And before we do anything, I want to just let you know that we realize that we are all here and a part of not one, but two global pandemics. One pandemic is the COVID-19 pandemic, where our own council member has been active and busy on day one. Before March was even over, she had already partnered with individuals in the community to feed more than 3,500 people. And to date, she has provided meals for over 130,000 Prince Georgians in District 8 and surrounding communities. That is phenomenal, Monique, and I just want to celebrate you and honor you for all that you are doing. I want to celebrate you, Monique, because I learned that you partnered with leaders in your community, hometown folk who are business executives and corporate executives, to provide face masks for frontline workers, a heart and passionate commitment to community means everything to me. I know to our listening audience, and I also know to this distinguished panel that you have before us. So thank you for the opportunity and privilege to begin tonight's conversation. Now, let's focus a little bit on our panelists. We are fortunate, and you have already done an exceptional job at presenting to us all of the panelists that we have, but I want to give a little bit of housekeeping so that we can begin this amazing conversation. The housekeeping is that I'm going to have each of our panelists take a minute and a half to do a self-introduction, then and to share with us just a smidget of their area of expertise tonight. After that, and yes, I will be timing you so that we can have this conversation, we'll have 2 round robins of questions. And so we'll ask those questions in your area of focus, and I'm going to go up the panel and down the panel in the order that you've received. When we ask your questions, we ask that you take your time. We're going to afford you 3 to 4 minutes to be able to really answer those questions. Monique has already introduced you, but I want to take just a moment to share a little bit about each one of you and give you a minute and a half to share with our audience what they need to know about you and your area of expertise and focus for tonight. The first person that I have the privilege of introducing is the mayor of the City of Ely, none other than the Tim Adams. Tim Adams is an executive as the president and CEO of his software tech company. And in addition to being a formidable businessman, he has been a leader in the community. Many of us know and love him in terms of his family, his wonderful children who just graduated from Duke Ellington this week. But I want to introduce to you and afford him an opportunity to introduce himself to the audience. Mayor Tim Adams, City of Ely.
Hey, thank you so very much. First, I would like to thank Councilwoman Anderson Walker, my fellow panelists, and everyone for joining us this evening to discuss a topic that's extremely important to the perpetuity and legacies within the African American community. And that is not just equity, but racial equity. Racial equity is defined as the condition that would be achieved if one's racial identity no longer predicted, in the statistical sense, how one fares. I have been blessed in my life. I am a native New Orleanian, but Bowie is now my home for over a quarter of a century. I have also been very fortunate to have started a business that I started out of the trunk of my car, but now is one of the largest Black-owned businesses in the nation. More importantly, I think I've had an opportunity to view several different areas that are important to all of us. Number one, not just from a business perspective, but also understanding how important it is to give back to the community, to be a good corporate citizen, to have an opportunity now to see how things work from the standpoint of trying to work within the political process to get things done. I think one of the things, and I'll leave it there because there's so much that we need to get to tonight, and I want to save that time. It's just that by having been on the board of Doctors Community Hospital and then the merger of Doctors Hospital and Anne Arundel Medical Center and Luminous Health, I have gotten a chance to see things from a medical perspective. By being a business owner during this pandemic and COVID and through these times, I've been able to see things from the business perspective. But most importantly, as well as by being the new mayor of Bowie, I've gotten a chance to see things from the political perspective as well. So I've been blessed with an opportunity to see things from a different vantage point and to kind of bring them all together. So I look forward to working and talking with everyone tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. You were absolutely spot on, 1 minute and 39 seconds. Perfect. Our next guest tonight is Justin Hansford. Justin, we all know him as a formidable lawyer, but his distinguished young career has deaned the halls of Harvard University as the Democracy Project Fellow. He is an associate professor and visiting professor at Georgetown University, associate at St. Louis University, and a formidable leader. We know him tonight as the executive director of Civil Rights for the Thurgood Marshall Foundation and initiative, but we are Civil Rights Justice Center. But what is most important to us is he is a leader and a voice for our community nationally and internationally in issues pertaining to civil rights in tonight's conversation. Justin, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here to speak to you this evening. I'm a law professor at Howard University School of Law. I'm sure there are some Howard graduates in the audience today who should be proud of the work that's happening at Howard right now. We've been able to, as a center, in our second year of existence, continue to try to push for civil rights and human rights using what our three-part strategy, which I always like to describe by saying we use our head, our hands, and our heart in our work at the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center. What I mean by that is we have a program of engaged legal research, and we create scholarship, and we create data that can be used to fight for civil rights. One of the things we've done most recently is create a white paper called The Contradiction of Colorblind COVID Relief, which we have already begun distributing. And in that report, we discuss how, because the African-American community has been disproportionately affected by the COVID pandemic in terms of disproportionate amounts of death. I think we are twice as likely to die as a result of the virus. Our businesses are more likely to close. We're more likely to face unemployment. So we have economic disproportionate outcomes. We know that people who are incarcerated can't social distance, and so they are at more risk for infection, and we know that we are disproportionately incarcerated. And of course, the policing crisis has only been become more of a central problem, even as the virus has plagued us. And so we argue that you need a color conscious response to this pandemic, because we are being hit in a way that is affecting us in a way that's not colorblind. So I'm happy about the research that we're doing. We've been filing lawsuits to help support protesters, even an amicus brief in the U.S. Supreme Court, which we filed early on this year. And of course, we do, so we get our hands dirty doing work on the legal side as well as the policy side. And of course, we lead with our hearts when we do community organizing. And we've had our amazing Howard University students, law students, and undergraduate students provide legal support as legal observers. And some of them have even been protesters themselves. So we're very happy about what we've been doing at Howard, and we're happy to do anything we can to move the conversation forward in Montgomery County and Prince George's County and in our local community.
Thank you so much, Justin. We appreciate you and the magnitude of work, putting pen to paper and having documented discussions for our community. Next, this amazing woman almost needs no introduction, but she is dear to my heart. I have known her since she began her political career and have stood by her side as she has championed the needs of our youth, of our incarcerated, of women. She has been a compassionate and committed leader, but also a brilliant scholar when it has come to solving some of the most complex problems of community law needs, legislative matters, and corporate law. It is my honor and privilege to introduce my friend, Aisha Braveboy, State's Attorney, Prince George's County.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Jennifer. And I definitely consider you a friend. So it's wonderful to see you. And to our esteemed Councilwoman, Monique Anderson Walker, thank you so much for putting on such a timely and really important panel discussion. And I'll be brief because I know we want to get to questions. But I would just say it's been a privilege to be the top law enforcement officer here in Prince George's County. I grew up here. I care about our community. My job is to protect the citizens and residents of Prince George's County. And we do that through prosecution. We do that through diversion. We do that through really problem solving. So not everything has to be prosecuted, because what we understand is that we have a dynamic community full of people who have suffered from traumas, who have addictions, who are suffering from homelessness, and a number of other issues that impact our justice system. So we take very seriously those crimes that present a real dangerous and serious threat to our community. And we take a compassionate approach when those individuals commit infractions against the state law, but that we believe can be handled in a way that is more appropriate to address that person's needs. And so taking what I consider a smart approach to addressing crime in our community, it's tough, it's hard work. It means that we have to be courageous. It means that we have to do things that have never been done before. But I've never been afraid of taking on a challenge. I'm tough, but I'm fair. We ensure that our prosecutions are thorough. We hold everyone accountable. There are not two sets of laws. There's only one set of a body of law that applies to the citizens and residents, as well as those who are in law enforcement. And so where we've had to bring cases against law enforcement officers, we've done so, and we have done so successfully. And where we believe that our citizens need to be prosecuted, we've done that as well. But again, we also believe in compassion and taking a really smart approach to and being problem solvers in our communities, and not simply people who administer punishment. So I'm very excited to be here for this discussion. I think I'll learn a lot. I look forward to being a part of the future discussions on how we change our justice system here and make our community fairer and safer for everyone. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, State's Attorney. Next, we have an individual that I consider to be enterprising, because in all of the work that I've done in these years with the commissions for women throughout the state of Maryland and nationally, in Montgomery County, there has been a leader who has had the hearts and mind, not only of the commissions for women there, but of leaders, community activists, advocates, and supporters throughout the community. We have had the pleasure of seeing him go from being a passionate and committed community servant and community leader to becoming an elected official. But his heart and his compassion shows by the things that he's done to form a nonprofit that Our Voices Matter in Maryland, to support summer jobs and summer jobs for youth, speaks to the depth and breadth. But I had the privilege every year at the Women's Legislative Briefing in Montgomery County to see this leader who would come to be with women that day, but he would stay. He would participate in the classes. He would listen, get involved, and have his ear to the pulse so that he could go back and serve and elevate the priorities of women. So he is a true champion of community and women, and it is my pleasure to have Council Member at Large, Montgomery County, Will Jawando. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Jennifer, and that was overly nice. I think part of the reason I'm a champion for women is because I have a lot of them in my house, as Council Member Anderson Walker knows, with a powerful wife and 3 daughters, and a baby boy. So I got some a little balance now. But thank you so much. It's great to be with everybody. And again, Councilmember Anderson Walker, thank you for your friendship and your leadership, not only in Prince George's County, but in the state of Maryland and in the nation. It's been great to partner with you on the Driving at Home initiative, which continues to be an important vehicle and pedestrian safety initiative that I'm glad we were working on together. It's great to see the state's attorney and Mr. Hansford and the whole panel, the mayor and Mr. Burrows and Ms. Miles. It's great to be with all of you. I'm an at-large member on the County Council in Montgomery County, the only African-American to serve the entire county in that capacity, and one of 2 ever. Our first was Ike Leggett, who was our longtime county executive, and then was in this position that I'm in before that on the county council. And I was born and raised in Silver Spring. I did live for a time in Prince George's County in Landover, so I have, I count that time while I was in law school and enjoyed it, and just am really a big fan of our area, our community, our state. I think if anyone's going to get it right, and when I say get it right, have the American dream of a good school, a diverse community, a safe neighborhood, a job that pays a living wage, and to be able to retire with dignity. I think we have a real good shot at making that a reality for Marylanders, whether it be Montgomery County, Prince George's County, or across the state. We know that we're living through a time when that's not been true. It's never been true for people with our skin color and many others. But we are at a time of transformational change, and I think where we can make significant progress to make those things a reality for everyone. And so that's been my focus in my job as an attorney. I'm a civil rights lawyer as well. I'm actually the only lawyer on the county council right now, which is odd. And worked in the Obama administration, both in the White House and Department of Education, and also on Capitol Hill for Nancy Pelosi and Sherrod Brown from Ohio. But I grew up a low-income kid in the Langley Park, area, right on the PG line. And I know what it is to want. And I have a lot of friends that aren't where I am. And I think about them every day. And as well as representing everyone in our county. I think oftentimes people think you can't care for the least of these or those that need help, and for those who are doing well. You got to care for both, because we're all in this together. And if these protests of the last 6 weeks have shown us anything, is that people are starting to get that we all need to be in this together, whether it be police violence or health disparities or the like. So I'm honored to be here and look forward to the discussion, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here. And last but certainly not least are our two young, powerful panelists tonight. Ed, yes, I know that you have matured into a refined young man, but we all remember you being that amazing young kid with enough chutzpah and spunk and grit to get out and run for office. I was there in 2010 when you took your first seat, and it has been my eyes' joy and my heart's joy to watch you mature and grow and not lose focus that you were elected by community for community to support the education of our youth. And I have admired you as you've stepped out boldly and aggressively, even when you might have made some enemies, to fearlessly stand up, speak up, and do the hard things that needed to be done to ensure leadership for our youth in our community. I am excited to have you on tonight's panel, and just want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and share with our audience some things they may not know about you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I definitely appreciate it. And I thank you for your friendship over, I guess, since 2010, a long time. You've been out here super active in our community always, especially when you were the chair of the Women's Commission. I want to thank Councilmember Anderson Walker, my council member, for inviting me today. And what you said mentioned something that most people don't know about me. Most people don't know that Councilmember Walker's mother is actually my grandmother. That is something that people don't realize. She and I met each other when she was on our school board for a number of years. And she has been a mentor, and I consider her my grandmother. To this day, we still talk all the time. And I want to thank you, Councilmember Walker, for what you're doing on the council. I'm watching. I mean, I watch how you accurately represented the views of the community as it related to the issues in policing. And that was important. And it took a lot of courage for you to give voice to that so passionately. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you. I have to go back and watch the tape, but everyone's calling me saying your council member really represented the people with this latest vote related to the tax increase. And so I can't wait to go back and look, but I know it's not easy, but you're doing it anyway. So I want to thank you for doing it. My name is Edward Burrows. I'm the vice chair of the county school board. I'm a graduate of Crossland High School. Then I went to Bowie State and then UMBC. I currently serve on the budget committee for the school system. For the next couple of days, I think, our committee structure will change soon. Our assignments will change soon. But I'm happy to be here to talk about a host of issues. And I agree with Mr. Jawanda when he said that if anywhere gets it right, I know in Prince George's County we can. I mean, we have the best state's attorney on the East Coast with us. We have excellent council members. We have a wonderful mayor in the city of Bowie. And we have the Black intellectuals and brown intellectuals right here to get this right. And I'm just happy to be a part of this team.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And last but not least, I have the honor and privilege of meeting a young Generation Z, just graduated, freshly minted, and so visionary, so passionate, and so committed that she had the foresight and vision to start a nonprofit organization. And in that, have a commitment to the very issues that we're discussing tonight, the rights for youth, the rights for men, Black men, the rights for Black lives that matter, and the rights for civil rights for all of us in this country. I am impressed to have learned so much about you, Marissa, about your leadership, about your tenure as a graduate of Oxon Hill High School. Congratulations. And I want to open the floor for you to share more with us about who you are. You're a special young lady in our hearts, and we're honored to have you on tonight's panel.
So, greeting everybody. My name is Marissa Miles, as she said, and I'm an active user of social media, as many Generation Z, and once the riots started going off in Minneapolis, and when I saw the fire of the president, I knew something was different. And from that moment, I got a group of friends and we started Resistance Research Coalition. And with that organization, we document everything that's happening. You know, history normally lies with the victors, and we cannot let this happen. We don't know what will be at the other end. But while this is all happening, and while we're slowly seeing reforms, and while the protests still haven't died, even if the media is not covering it, and with my group, seeing what's happening, getting people on the ground, and doing all of those things, it gives young people a chance to, one, get experience and research and being active in their community, but also they get to be a part of history themselves. Me as a person, I was SGA president of Oxon Hill High School, also very involved with county and ultimately state student government. But most importantly, I'm very humbled to be a part of this panel, seeing so many accomplished people. You guys are the places where I want to be in 10, 15, 20 years. So to round this off, I'll be a rising urban studies major at the University of Illinois at Chicago, but I hope to bring all those talents that I learned there back to Maryland. So let's have a great panel today, guys.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Leadership begins early in life, and we see examples and models of it, but the fact that you've been fearless in moving forward has just touched us. So we are going to begin our panel, but before I do, Councilmember Monique Anderson Walker, you participated last week in a panel discussion, or shall I say a council meeting, where our current County Executive, Angela D. Osselbrooks, as well as our recently resigned Chief of Police, former Chief Sawinski, and former Chief of Police McGaugh, were on with all of your council member and colleagues, as well as a representative from the Fraternal Order of Police. And after what was an eloquent and substantive and true presentation of our state of affairs in Prince George's County when it comes to judicial matters, law enforcement, leadership, State's Attorney, County Executive Angela Osselbrooks made a wonderful statement that made me leap. I know it made you leap, because we've been so committed to mental health, substance abuse, and addressing those issues. But after such a wonderful opening to hear from the panel guests who were there to talk to us about all of the things related to the civil unrest, the peaceful protests, and George Floyd's murder, You did what Ed has already referenced, and all of us know. You stepped out and made a statement. And I just want you, for our listening audience, to just frame just a snapshot of what was on your heart about the state of law enforcement matters in Prince George's County.
You know, I appreciate our law enforcement. You know, I've worked closely with them from the time I stepped into office, and I continue to work closely with them. I think it's important for community policing. But I think we need to be careful that we don't police some people and protect and serve others. And that's what I was really getting at with some of the issues that have been fairly consistent, that have been somewhat very problematic in the county. I think you're aware of the history of Prince George's. Many people say PG. They think that it's just a shortening of the word. But when I was growing up in the 70s, that stood for pay and guarantee. And that was related to police brutality, which was prevalent. And not to repeat history, we recognize that we need to put some things in place. And whether that is making sure that we have local homegrown police officers that step into positions, certainly that our command staff should be from this area. I did make points about people driving from Pennsylvania to come here, and the cultural differences that, you know, growing up in the area, you have an idea what the culture is. I don't know what the culture is in Pennsylvania. There's a difference. And it does impact the way people are treated. If you're not familiar with, then you might have fear and you might react differently because of your fear. I certainly made those statements, and those are, I think, well documented. So I don't want to totally have to go through that, but you know, in a nutshell, we need to look at some major changes with regard to our leadership in the police force, and it needs to be reflective of those people who are in the community. And I don't think I can be any plainer than that. We also need to be fair with our county has taken on a lot of the brunt of making payments for bad actors, for, you know, police officers who have who've hurt people, paralyzed them, killed them. And what ends up happening is if they move forward, get their pension and move on, and we're stuck with the bill to pay retribution. So these are all things that I really want to address in policy changes. And that's the plan, to do so in policy changes. I hope we've learned from our past, and then we can move forward and not repeat it.
Thank you. Thank you. That was an excellent summation. And I can tell you, Monique, when I watched the video, and as I've talked to several people over the last week in preparation for tonight's panel, the continuous theme that everyone had was they appreciated your truth, your honesty, you speaking to the facts, and not being focused on tearing down, but focused on moving forward. So to our panelists, tonight we are here to leverage this opportunity from a bold leader to be able to hear from you. And so the 2 round robins that we're going to have is 1, to leverage your expertise, and then 2, to hear from our audience the questions that they want to hear you answer. And so the purpose of tonight is, and the mission of tonight, if you have a clearly defined mission, is to talk about the facts and the truth, and to move forward towards solutions. And so solutions is our theme word tonight, and I want to hear from each one of you. And first, it is my honor to ask this question of a formidable businessman. You are the mayor of Bowie, and the city of Bowie is fortunate to have Mayor Tim Adams as its mayor. But tonight, you have always been in numerous conversations very clear about the economic inequities that exist. You have been challenging to our community to operate in a spirit of excellence. And like John Hope Bryan says, it's not about civil rights anymore. It's about silver rights. And so I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts in the context of this global civil justice movement? What economically do you think is problematic, and what do we need to do about it in the Black community in Prince George's County?
I think it's important that we understand that there's somewhat of a change in how we present things. And what I mean by that is, historically, we've just talked about having things that are transparent. But what we need to understand is a new form of transparency needs to be racial equity. And that equity, it takes many forms. I think from my perspective, one of the things we have to do is, and you've heard it through business, through a lot of ways, put in different ways, but the reality is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so from a racial equity standpoint, what we need to do is make sure that we start making those statistics public, not only from a business perspective, but even as it goes towards our health equity, as well as our overall policing equity. So one of the things that I think we've heard so often when we start trying to talk about economic equity, when we really want to do it is, for lack of a better way to say it, and we've got to stop being so careful in what we say and just say the reality of it. Even here in Prince George's County, where we are supposed to be so affluent, we are still what I refer to as political sharecroppers and economic sharecroppers. And what I mean by that is we do a lot, but in the end, we don't really own our own political power. In the end, we really don't own our own economic power. And that's what we've got to work towards doing. We've got to make sure that we don't do short-term solutions for long-term problems. And what I mean by that, from a moving forward, one of the things we have to do is we have to really measure where we are economically. When we talk about putting out contracts, for example, just county contracts or city contracts, we need to not just measure and say, okay, well, this percentage was given to Black or brown people to Black businesses, but we need to actually track the dollars that are there, that are actually given. You know, some people don't realize sometimes there are contracts that are awarded on the state level and people say, oh, we gave 40% of the contract to a minority-owned firm and this is the dollar value, when it may be 40% of the work, but it's only really 10% of the profits or the dollars. So we really have to start showing transparently what's going on with those dollars. We got to show the equity. And it can't just be about contracts awarded and those things, but the real dollars that are hitting the economies and the Black businesses here in our communities. And so that's a big step for us. And again, because it goes back to, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so, in other words, we need to know the truth of what are the dollars that are coming back to the businesses in our community, not just a percentage of a contract.
I love those comments, and I love about the circulating dollars. It's not just who's making it, but is that money circulating and staying in our community? As many of you may know or may have not heard, Maggie wrote in her book when she did her year Buying Black, and she talked about that by racial groups, that the dollar from Jewish community recirculated 15 to 20 times. Hispanic community even circulates 6 times. And in the African American community, the dollar circulates 1 time. That means that monies are going out of communities of color and not reinvesting in schools and roads and infrastructure, resources and support. So thank you so much, Tim. Next, I really want to have, in this climate, Justin, when there's so many conversations are being had about defunding the police, can you enlighten us from the vantage points from which you rest? What does defunding the police mean? What is its intent, and is it something you support? And most importantly, what should communities of color be asking for when they say defund the police? What do you want to happen?
Sure. Well, I would say right now, cities across the country, including Los Angeles, Minneapolis, many cities across the country are rethinking municipal budgets and reevaluating whether the police are doing jobs they were never intended to do in their communities. We have a unique opportunity right now to rethink what it means to promote public safety in our cities. One example I like to use, we know that recently we've had these protests where we have seen tanks being used and tear gas being used against protesters, but we also live in a country where we don't have enough money for ventilators for everybody. Why don't we see the provision of social services, health services, infrastructure, and other types of expenditures as just important, if not more important, to our public safety needs than police are? I do think that we are seeing great strides happen in Montgomery County and Prince George's County. The provision of mental health services would be the type of thing that would replace the decision to call police whenever somebody is facing a mental health crisis. When there's a question involving homelessness, as opposed to calling police, why don't we call another type of social service provider who can help that person find a safe place to sleep? These are the types of ideas that people should think about when they think about the concept of defunding the police. And whenever you're thinking about these ideas around defunding or even abolition, I want folks to keep in mind that it's not simply a project of eradicating, but also a project of creating. Not simply a project of taking down, but also a project of building up. And the real challenge for municipal budgets around the country is, what are we going to build up to replace the system that is based on policing and incarceration, and trying to solve our problems through the criminal justice system? And I think that's the space where people here on this call will have an opportunity to think creatively. And one of the beauties about the defund project is that it is broad enough to allow local policymakers like yourselves to think creatively. Councilwoman Anderson Walker discussed the fact that cities are spending a great deal of money in their budgets covering the expenses created by police violence, but they don't have to do that. I know that there are contracts made with police unions, and I don't know the details of the contract in our jurisdictions, but in many situations there are deals that have been in existence for a long time that now is our chance to rethink those deals, produce millions of dollars in savings for our city, for our county, and reinvest those savings into true community safety initiatives and things that will help to build the lives of our children and the lives of our community members, reinvest in our schools, reinvest in creating more educational opportunities in our schools as opposed to school resource police officers, and find ways to make our county and our cities a better place to live. So I think that's what we should think about when we think about this idea. Many people are confused. They go to the most extreme interpretation of the concept. I do think that defunding does mean defunding and abolition does mean abolition, but it's on us as people who are trying to create solutions on the local level to figure out how that translates on the ground in real time.
Thank you so much, and thank you for not only the creative ideas, but highlighting the impact of realignment or redirecting those dollars to community, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. State's Attorney Brave Boy, we have had the privilege of having a majority-minority community that is a very successful community on the one hand, with a lot of successful business owners, high-dollar individuals, property values, just a number of things that are just make Prince George's County a beautiful community. And at the same time, we've had a long history of law enforcement challenges in Prince George's County. I remember being representing a college student when the young man was shot in the back in southern Prince George's County. And they told us when I was here at the National Institutes of Health, don't go to Prince George's County at night. And for years, to move back 10 or 15 years later and become such a lover of Prince George's County and the community, I am sometimes saddened when I still see remnants of that old police force. We see from the resignation of Chief Sawinski that there's still problems in multifaceted and multi-layered problems. Can you speak to us as the leader, right, of our law enforcement and indictment in the county? Can you talk to us about the problems that we see? What in your mind are the top 3 or 5 real challenges that you want everyone to know that you're aware of? And then share with us just your perspective on it as it relates to this summit today.
Sure. Well, I think one of the biggest issues we've had is really lack of transparency and accountability. I think that it is true that most officers, the vast majority, are hardworking men and women who are, who desire to protect our streets and to serve our communities. But what happens is when you do have individuals in a department that violate departmental protocol, that violate the constitutional or civil rights of people either living in or traveling through our communities, and that is not something that is that issue is not transparent, those individuals are not held accountable, then it really puts a negative light on the entire department. And so one of the things that we have asked for and that we will continue to push for with the support of the community is transparency. Access for my office to important personnel records that will aid us in reviewing our cases and determining whether or not we should move forward with certain types of cases, because the integrity of our officers, their behavior, how they treat our residents, extremely important to us. It also gives us an opportunity to help them with training. And that's, again, another issue that I find. So transparency is one issue. Training is another. We are working on developing a very comprehensive training program for our police department. We offer training now, and we do participate in trainings with them. However, I think we need more intensive training, including use of force training, and also best practices in terms of interacting and engaging with individuals. Another big issue that I see is lack of resources to really address some individuals who have very serious problems in our community, like mental health issues or who are homeless. And so another area that I think it would be very important for the entire community to want to invest in is mental health resources that can aid our police department when they respond to certain types of calls. Because when you have individuals who are having an episode or who are dealing with a mental health crisis and they have a police response, which oftentimes even their families call on the police. It's not just, someone out on the street, a business owner, just a resident who may not know that person. Oftentimes it is someone who is a loved one of that person who has that mental health crisis that is calling the police, asking for assistance because they want their loved one just to not hurt themselves or hurt another person. When the police respond, they're responding as law enforcement, and oftentimes that escalates the situation. And what we really need is a more comprehensive response. So one of the things I will be really pushing for and advocating for is a mobile mental health response team that can aid our police department in responding to calls so that it does not escalate and that you have professionals who are trained to deal with people in crisis. Because number one, what we all have to believe is that that life is in preserving and protecting life is our number one priority. So in any engagement on any stop, that police officer obviously wants to protect him or herself, but they also want to protect the life of the person who they are engaging with. And in order to do that effectively, we need to have more resources responding. And I'll give you an example. When there's an accident, police will respond to that accident. But guess what? Fire EMS responds too, because we understand that someone may need help because they've been in a car accident. They may have physical health issues that need to be addressed. Similarly, if we know someone has a mental health crisis, then it is appropriate for us to also have an emergency team made up of mental health professionals who can also aid and assist police when they respond to those crises. So that's something that I believe we need to have. In addition to that, we need to give the police officers more options. Right now, what happens is someone is committing an offense, let's say trespassing or fourth-degree burglary, which is breaking into an unoccupied space. That individual is generally arrested. Is taken down to the commissioner's office, gets before commissioner. The commissioner determines whether or not they're going to be released that night, or whether or not they're going to be detained. And of course, the next day, then they have a hearing before a judge. But that means that person has charges pending against them. Police have very limited options when they run into situations like that. So I think we have to be able to give them alternatives to taking an individual to a commissioner and charging them, which means we need to build a stronger social safety net in our community, where if there are individuals who are homeless, instead of taking them to jail, we can take them to a social service agency that can aid them and assist them that night with housing, and then maybe the next day triage them for their other needs. Some are chronically homeless. Some have mental health issues that may or may not be diagnosed. Some have addictions, and all of those things that can be addressed and should be addressed. The criminal justice system is not really the appropriate place to address them, but those are the limited options that our officers currently have. And so I think if we really are truly interested in creating a 21st century kind of public safety model for our county, then it can't just be that you call the police and the only thing the police can do is charge an individual and take them down to the commissioner's office. It's got to be that the police have other options as well. And as a community, we need to provide those other options. So those are some of the challenges that I see, and some of the opportunities, which I think is most important, some of the opportunities that we have to create a better and more positive system moving forward.
Thank you so much, State's Attorney. And I loved hearing you offer solutions while trying to capture and frame the challenges that law enforcement has in the process. I'm so excited to hear you talking about mental health. Many moons ago, I think it was in 2014, we held the county's first substance abuse and mental health, and you were in a different capacity there, but you still showed up. And I love that Councilmember Walker has made health and mental health a key central part of her own platform, because we're learning that at the nexus of these problems that we're seeing are still these unaddressed issues. And now we're in this climate of COVID-19 that has created an entirely different norm, and therefore has created its own degree of mental strain and strife. And to have that overlaid by George Floyd's murder, as well as the normal mental health challenges that we have, I think that if we can create that divide, we do well. And Monique, I just want to again shout out and champion you for moving forward and for making this commitment to address the mental health concerns of our community.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. And I do want to add too, which, when you're looking at mental health, let's look at health and housing. Because, much of the time we're looking at mental health as something that's standalone. But the truth is, some of the housing choices that we make in development in this county aren't helpful. So when we develop senior housing, it sounds like a great idea. But what we're finding is right around year 6, they get priced out, and there's a lot of isolation. We instituted a circulator just to get seniors out of their place so that they can go to work out or go to the library, go shopping. Unfortunately, this came out right around the time of COVID, so it didn't really get going. But let's consider this too as we look at development. There is some lack of equity in how certain jurisdictions develop and others develop. I see some challenges that we have here with flooding and overdevelopment, which I think is a racial imposition. I think it shows an injustice. Many times it is someone from outside of the community who comes in and says, this is what we're going to do. Well, that's not what the zoning says is allowed. Well, we'll change the zoning. Now, I'm sitting on the council, so obviously I see this in different ways, and my background is in commercial real estate. I have a commercial real estate company. I've been in real estate for over 20 years. But there's equity. We should pursue equity. I will just mention this, and then we'll move on, because I know that you have your task ahead of you. But I do want to mention that when we look at sprawl development or development in floodplains, that's an issue that will cause flooding somewhere. There's been a discussion that, hey, if you are in a floodplain, we can take you out of the floodplain. You can take something out of the floodplain. You don't eradicate a floodplain. You just push it somewhere else. And that somewhere else is generally the older communities. So what we do see with a lot of new developments is they're perfectly fine because they were engineered to be. The challenge is that anything surrounding it is at risk. We see that in our communities here. I don't want to call out anyone in particular, but this is something that we see in the southern part of the county. We're right at the mouth of the Potomac River, so this is the lowest lying area. So if there is development in a floodplain in Laurel, we will feel the brunt of it. So I think that as we move forward, we need to look at legislation and how land use is, how unfair practices there might be in land use. And also with infrastructure. We have WSSC issues, which cause health problems. You know, if you have pipes bursting and you have raw sewage going into the Potomac River around people's homes, there's going to be an impact, a negative impact. So I want to talk about that health. I want to mention that here. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to go into depth, but I think it's worth mentioning that these environmental challenges affect people's health. We talk about health disparities. These are some of the things that impact it. Flooding is not just water. There is contaminants that come into your space as a result of this. And sometimes a total disregard by the people who just want to build what they want to build. So I do want to mention that. With regard to taxing also, that's inequity. We need to pay attention to every little thing. The police issue just brings out the most obvious and unfortunately tragic of what we might say is racial inequality or inequity. But there's so many other inequities that we need to focus on. And so many times people aren't paying attention when laws are passed that are impacting their lives. And by the time they figure it out, the law's already been passed. So we need to be much more involved. I think COVID has presented an opportunity for us to slow down enough to stop, to get on Zoom and watch Mayor Adams' meetings and follow them, or check in on the county council. And I hope they continue to do that. And on the school board, I think the most important vote you're ever going to make is that school board member. And that is probably the truth. I'm saying this as a council member. I think the most important vote you're going to ever make is for your school board. That will dictate so much about the economic development that can occur, the preparedness of those people. And this is also where we see inequity. So I will let you move on. I just want to mention those things. You're muted.
Thank you so much. Those things needed to be mentioned because we are at the midway of our panel, sharing and enlightening us in their areas of expertise. And so, Will, as an attorney, equity is defined as the quality of being fair and impartial. So as many jokes are made about lawyers and as many people have thoughts about attorneys, because you have a heart for community, you are an elected leader, and you have this ferocious legal background that you admitted, surprisingly, only to another colleague of yours are lawyers on the council. Talk to me about equity and what you see as the 3 top priorities that communities need to move forward, that we could do some work balancing equity.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. And this has been a great conversation. One of the most important things when you're talking about, and I like that Mayor Adams mentioned this from the beginning, I think it was Mayor Adams, about racial equity. You know, it's not just equity or something, or maybe, you know, that we need to be specific. We want both things, but in this country, the system was built on racism and anti-Blackness in particular, which has, you know, spread to various gradations of anti-brownness. And, you know, there's a system that was created, and it's all related to chattel slavery and in order to build our economic systems. So I think the first thing we need to do, if we really want equity, and you're seeing it happen now, which is very exciting, as people wake up and as Black books and about racism and are sold out and top New York Times bestseller, people are trying to learn about it, is we have to understand our history, and we have to directly connect our legacy of anti-Blackness and racism to every institution we have. And Council Member Anderson Walker was talking about this just recently, that whether you look at any indicator, whether it's how we die disproportionately in COVID, in my county, similar to other parts of the state and the country, 1 in 4 of the people who have died from COVID are Black, even though we only represent 19% of the population here in Montgomery County. In some places, it's close to 3 times. It's higher than that in Washington, D.C. and other places. If you look at maternal health, Black women die 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth, right? Even if they're highly educated and have a good income. You know, a highly educated, high earning Black woman dies at a higher rate than a low educated, poor white woman in childbirth in this country. Whether you look at who gets hit on our roads as pedestrians with cars, trucks, and buses, we talk about driving it home. Disproportionately Black and Brown residents, because their communities were disinvested in, and redlining occurred, and we don't have sidewalks and walkways, and enforcement is done differently. And of course, in police violence, where if you're a Black man in this country, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that you're going to die at the hands of police. More than 2 times more likely than any other person. Obviously, our women are more likely to die as well. Whether it's asthma rates, go down the list, economic, education, opportunity gap, housing, you're going to see. And all of those things have their root in institutional racism. And so that's why we took action last week to pass a resolution declaring racism a public health emergency. Not only do we die from COVID and from police violence, we die in many other ways. And if we don't die, we have much lower quality of life, whether it's life expectancy and other things. So we have to tie that together, because you can't fix a systemic problem that's been being built for 401 plus years unless you have a systemic solution and unless you diagnose the problem correctly. And the problem is racism. And it's not just individual, you're a bad person because you don't like Black people. No, it's systemic racism. It's baked into the American apple pie. I say racism is as American as apple pie. And that's why that resolution was important, because it ties it together. And then you have to have a plan of action in all of those areas to tackle it and dismantle it. And, you know, we passed a racial equity bill that starting this August, every bill and budgetary item we consider will have a racial equity impact statement attached to it, similar to you get a budgetary analysis and a fiscal analysis, we're going to have a racial equity analysis. Now we still have to act upon that information. And so it'll show us how it could impact us, but we still have to take action. And that's why I said it's an emergency, because you have to act urgently to address these issues. And that's going to require systemic and radical change and reallocation of budget. You can't keep doing things the same way. And the last thing I'll say is, if you think about our time in this country as Black people, if we arrived at 1619, first documented history, there were obviously Black people in this country before that, Africans. Those enslaved Africans that arrived on the shores of Virginia started the formal system of chattel slavery from 1619 to 1965, the last major civil rights legislation we had, the Voting Rights Act. 86% of the time that we've been here on this country, in this continent, we've either been enslaved for several hundred years or legally discriminated against by the state. So, you can't extricate that with one policy, with one bill, with one law. It's going to take systemic effort. And now we're starting to wake up and say, oh, wow, there's a problem. And now is the time that we can start really, really picking up that pace and making those systemic and institutional changes.
That was an absolutely beautiful expansion of our conversation, and just moves us forward towards where we are. Ed, we've heard from Councilmember Anderson Walker. We've heard from Councilmember Jawando that education is a central, pivotal, and very core component of equity. Talk to us about what is happening in Prince George's County and the power, influence, and capability of you as a school board member and others. What can be done to leverage the seat that you have to make a difference? So what's the problems that you see? Where can we make changes, and how do we make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Our school district is very large, and we serve a very diverse student population. 80% of our students are of color, and 60% of our students are on free and reduced meals. We have a rapidly growing Latino population in the northeast part of the county, and so we are dealing with overcrowding issues in the northeast of the county. At the same time, there's certain issues that have been issues for a long time that we are addressing now, and I'm happy that we are. When it comes to equity, what that means is that we do what we need to do for our own, and that might not be the same. That might not be the same thing that's taking place throughout the other parts of the state, but we have to pay special attention to our unique students. And so I was so happy several months ago when the board has financial literacy as a graduation requirement. Parents cannot pass down what they don't know. And in so many parts of our community, we are the most affluent, proudly the most affluent African-American community in the nation, and I'm proud of that. But there are pockets of poverty in our county. And so I'm so happy that the board voted to pass that. And I know that it'll make a big difference for so many of our young people. One of the things I just worked on recently, actually on Monday in our budget committee meeting, was ensuring that we're teaching authentic and accurate Black and Brown history. I was joking with the mayor, I guess about 2 days ago, about a lot of Bowie. If you look at our history, was filled with plantations. And now in 2020, we have the first African-American mayor who owns the 49th largest Black-owned business that he started out the trunk of his car. Like, our students need to know that. When our students know that history that's happening right before their eyes, I believe that it'll raise the hope and confidence and the self-esteem of an entire generation. And so, and I was so happy that, someone mentioned, or he could just be on my mind right now, but Marion Barry, how Marion Barry, who I know Grandma, Councilmember Walker, talks so highly of, how he helped build the Black middle class and upper middle class of this entire region. Young people need to know that. It's important for me to know that, so that we are working on our policies and as it relates to contracting, that we can mimic some of those things, that we can learn from them. So that's one issue that is now underway. What that initiative on Monday that received the support of the budget committee called for was a kindergarten through 12th grade examination of our curriculum. We need to identify the deficiencies and inaccuracies, and we need to embed authentic and accurate Black and Brown history in our schools. And we can also partner with the Howard University of Morgan State and Bowie State, along with our school-based educators, to write that curriculum. Another issue as it relates to equity is around teacher vacancies. It is, every student deserves to have a teacher in front of them. And in large districts like ours, we do a great job. We have over 10,000 teachers, but when you look at our numbers, we have 250 teacher vacancies, right? So if you do that times 30, our average class size is thousands of students without a teacher in front of him or in front of them. And those vacancies are largely in certain communities, right? And so I was so happy that, working with Dr. Golson, we're wrapping our arms around our conditional teachers, ensuring that we help them get their certifications so that we don't have this revolving door of conditional teachers. For those of you who don't know, our school district can grant someone without the proper certifications a conditional teacher license if they meet the requirements, if they agree to meet the requirements within a 2-year time period. But the requirements could be, the requirements in addition to passing the practice could be taking 15 credits. If you're a first-year teacher making $47,000, it could be a lot to then have to pay out of pocket for coursework. And so the school district, we're working out the details now with community college, but we've allocated in this year's budget a sizable amount of money to say, we will pay for your courses. We're going to walk you through your certification process, but you're going to have to agree to stay with us for 5 years so that we fill our teacher vacancies. And so that, I was so happy to be the sponsor on that one as well. And so those are 3 things that we've been able to adjust. And I know Councilmember Walker is very happy about financial literacy because Delegate Walker has sponsored it year after year. Dr. Anderson was a proponent of it when she served on the board. So I found like we're finally getting our board in the right direction to tackle some of these important issues. But there's a lot of work that still needs to take place, for sure.
Thank you so much, Ed. You just lifted me when you talked about hope and when you framed the diversity in our county and among our student population and what we have there. Those are so important. And now, Marissa, I am going to afford you the opportunity, but there's something that's so important. You are a part of Generation Z. So for those of us who are in the 40 plus club, we get excited about young people because we want to hear your ideas and your truth and your perspective. So I don't want to fully burden you with being the voice for all of your generation, but I do want to hear from you. What do you think about this issue of equity and how does your generation feel about it? What are your thoughts and where's your vision for the future?
Seeing everything that's happened over the few weeks has given me a lot of hope, as Burroughs has previously said. It's a lot of hope and optimism because also with our generation, we have access that older generations just didn't have. I've been exposed to so many different types of radical thinking and books and recommendations just through social media. Just one little tool has exposed me to so much. And students and young people really have the opportunity to learn so much. But from a young person perspective and thinking about schooling, because schooling is your whole life until you're 18 for the most part, like your life revolves around school. I think that while we're talking about police and the state of humanity, one idea that I really resonated with is taking the police out of your mind And when I say that is the way that we police ourselves, the way we police our communities, and the way we police students. I think that's something that a lot of people individually need to think about how that resonates in ourselves. You know, police as a system in our community, you know, they can cause a lot of harm. They can also do good, but a lot of times they can cause harm. But as members of the community, we have to think about how policing manifests itself in different ways. But back to Gen Z, I'm honestly impressed. From March for Our Lives to climate action, I have complete faith in what our generation is doing. And at this point, we just need the other generations to support us. We have already started building the infrastructure to start changing things. We just need your support. I know change is scary, but we need your support. We have to be creative and imaginative. We have systems in place that, you know, weeks ago, no one could even think about, maybe we don't need prison. Maybe we don't need police. You know, those types of ideas people weren't speaking about a few weeks ago. And now those things start to seem possible. And the young people are the ones who manifest those ideas. You know, every new generation has different ideas than their parents' generations and older. But now you see those beliefs can really become true. I emphasize that we need the support of the older generation, but we started building the infrastructure, and it's happening. It's happening, and that's all I have to say.
I think that you said much, and you said it very well. How impressive. You are everything that we hoped you would be, but you are just a jewel. And thank you. So now we're going to make the best use of these 10 minutes of our time. I am literally going to cut you off if you go over. I have a litany of questions from our audience, and so I'm going to give you 45 seconds to answer these questions, and I'm going to go very swiftly. Justin. Members of our audience asked a question. Did we lose Justin? Okay, I'll wait for Justin to come back. Let me go to you. Tim, Angela Street asked, as the leader of a community, the third largest city in the state of Maryland, what do you need citizens to do to get involved? And what's out there? What activities, what organizations, what do citizens need to do to get involved?
I think that's a great question, because citizens need to become engaged in several different things. We have a public safety committee. Become involved. That public safety committee takes a charge and looks at what's going on in our police department and other areas. Become a part of that. Become a part of our diversity committee. You have an opportunity there to talk about what's going on in our community and how we improve our community. And I guess last but not least is be engaged overall into what's going on with the city council, what the votes are, what the issues are. Speak up, be engaged, because understand sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the oil, so to speak. And so we need to know what your beliefs are. The one thing we kept talking about when we all campaigned and all of that, and I think all of us agree to this, is we're here to manifest your voice, the citizen's voice. You need to tell us what you want. We need to hear you. You need to be there so that I can know that we as a council are doing what you want.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ed. We got a question about from Tasha Van Zeen. Tasha asked the question about civic engagement, policing, and police in our schools, and about community and what we can do to improve the state of affairs in our schools that police don't need to be there. Or you tell us, do they need to be in our schools?
That is something that we are literally reviewing right now. We have there was a proposal that was tabled to September the 15th. And so that's something that we're going to study over the summer. And so I would be interested to get her thoughts about what direction we should go in, because not too long ago, Prince George's County led the state in the amount of students that were arrested in our schools. I mean, at one point in time under the Maxwell administration, we arrested more students than Montgomery, Baltimore City, and Charles counties combined. And that's unacceptable. So we really have to examine the role of policing. We want to make sure that we keep our students safe while we ensure that we don't create environments where the school to prison pipeline is being manifested in our own school district. So I'm interested in hearing more from the community on that.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Ed. Justin, welcome back. Justin, one of our, Shelley McRae just asked the question about voting, and I'm going to share the same with you. Talk to us about voting rights, voter suppression, and what we need to be thinking about in the space of civil rights and the law.
Sure. Thanks for asking that question. We saw what happened in Kentucky over the last day or so. We're continuing to see voter suppression as a strategy all around the country.
I'm going to give you 3 seconds. Justin, what happened in Kentucky for our audience? What happened in Kentucky?
So in Kentucky, there was a strategic suppression of the Black vote over the course of recent days, months, and years. They've limited the amount of polling locations in Kentucky so that people had very long lines, and then they closed those polls right on time, leaving people to bang on the doors to try to get inside the voting booth in time to vote. And that's unacceptable. And I think what we're going to need to see is the provision of mail-in voting ballots and normalizing that. And the fight to try to make that inaccessible is going to be one of the primary civil rights fights this upcoming November. We're not going to be past the pandemic before the election takes place. And so the die is set, the stage is set for a chaotic election period because of that fact. And we need to be thinking proactively and ensuring that we have all of the resources necessary.
Thank you so much. State's Attorney Brave Boy, Linda Schaeffel asked a question about the Department of Justice having been involved in Prince George's County in the early 2000s and having been involved recently. Tell us about that and what do we need to know? Update us and share.
Yeah, so in the early 2000s, actually, I was just starting government at that time, and there was a civil rights, complaint filed against the county's police department, and in that case, I believe that the remedy was limited to and really addressed the issue of how the K-9 units were being used on citizens and residents here in Prince George's County, and it was really just terrible practices in the police department that led to the finding that there was, a violation of constitutional and civil rights of people, and that it needed to be addressed. And at the time, the county entered into an MOU with the Justice Department. Now we have a complaint that the county has that's been made against the county, which alleges racial discrimination and bias internally in the police department. So there are current and former members of the Prince George's County Police Department that has brought a racial bias suit. It is very concerning, obviously, to certainly my office, and I believe to the county executive and the entire county, the council as well, because what we want is for our police department to operate with integrity. We want every individual in our police department to understand that the bias is unacceptable, whether it's on the street or within the department. And where we see that bias and prejudice, if it exists, it needs to be rooted out, period. My job as state's attorney is to make sure that any case that I have that's brought by this police department is brought with integrity. And so that is why I talked earlier about transparency. We've requested the unredacted report of the consultant that was hired by the plaintiffs to investigate instances of racial bias and disparate treatment in the department. So we've asked for that information because it's important to us to know who on the police department has allegations against them, because then we need to be able to investigate those allegations, because they may have cases in our office, and we need to weigh that when we are making charging decisions and decisions to move forward with certain cases. So,
Okay.
so it's anyway. The point is, demanding transparency is really important. This suit is concerning. Obviously, there's been no findings yet, but having the suit out there is very concerning to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Will, we just heard Ed talk to us about youth, about police in schools. Talk to us about youth civic engagement. What do our young people need to be doing? What are they doing? And what do you see as a community leader turned elected leader turned person who understands comprehensively the law as it relates to community? What about youth civic engagement?
Well, it's critical, and it's been critical. I think you're seeing that with whether it's Marissa, congratulations on your graduation again. Excited to see what you'll do. You're seeing that in real time. I mean, our youth have been leading us in so many ways for a long period of time now, whether it's the environmental movement, whether it's the getting guns, getting real gun control in this country, and now in the police reform movement and reimagining policing and public safety. They are on the forefront and continue to be. And I think our job is to help, focus and hone and work with them and use that energy to get those of us who are entrusted with being elected. We need to lift those voices up, create forums for that. We just created a police advisory commission that I offered an amendment that 2 of the positions of the 11 have to be for young people. And so we have to intentionally include their voices, but also work with them to push these policies forward, because their civic engagement, they are going to be the ones that are dealing with this system. And so we need them at the forefront, at the table, completely involved, not just kind of a aside. So, and I'm glad we're seeing that, but I think we need to do a better job as elected leaders. And I like to still think I'm young. I know I'm not that young.
Me too, Will.
We need to do our job to bring them in and make sure they're included, because that's the only way we're going to get things done.
Thank you so much. And Marissa, before we go and before I turn things back over to Council Member, what can we expect from you? I know you talked about your major and upcoming career, but what's next for you and how can we help? Because we're going to all be leaning in. If you want to give your website address or your social media handles, please do so. We're going to be leaning in to help you.
Yes. So as I said, I'll be at University of Illinois at Chicago in the fall. My social media handles are all Marissa N. Miles. My email address is marissanmiles@gmail.com. Any opportunities, any internships, any chance to speak. I love to work with youth younger than me. Any opportunities would be amazing. I'm again so blessed to be on a panel like this, but in the future, you're just going to see me speaking out. Right now, I'm learning. I got to do the reading. There's a running joke on Twitter. It's like, y'all don't read. Y'all have all these opinions, but y'all don't read. So right now I'm doing the reading so I can come back and be that much more powerful. So that's what's up for me.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to congratulate this entirely powerful panel that has dealt with this issue of equity in Black America. We've talked about everything from racial equity to equity in land use and development, educational equity, legal equity, voting rights. We've talked about everything from students being arrested. We have so many individuals who have been on asking questions online, from Shelley McRae, Teslam Al-Ghaffar, Kevin Thornton, pardon me if I butchered your name, Dominique McMillan, Linda Seifel, Angela Street. I've tried to get your questions into the conversation that we're having. The most important thing that I want to do right now is turn the floor over to Council Member Monique Anderson Walker. But before I do, I want to thank Gina Anderson Ford and the Orange Crush team for putting together an amazing amazing panel. I want to thank all of the participants who took the time to pause and listen to this meaningful conversation. And I want to thank our panel, Mayor Tim Adams, Council Member Will Jawando, Professor Justin Hansford, Vice Chair Ed Burrows, and our first president to be. I hope we don't have to wait that long, Marissa, but I'm going to go ahead and call it out and claim it. Our first president to be, Marissa Miles, and none other than the state's attorney for Prince George's County, Aisha Braveboy. Thank you all for tonight's panel. Monique, I'm going to turn things over to you and our panel. When we close out, I want each one of you to say one powerful word or statement so that we can leave our audience empowered. Monique?
Thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. But listen, this is just the beginning. I didn't think that we were going to have a whole lot of action items, but I think that the discussion is what's important so we can start getting our issues together to take action. I'm very excited about what Will Jawando is doing in Montgomery County, and he and I will continue to be in partnership to make sure this region becomes stronger together. We're all in this together. And we're going to see what's worked well there that we can implement here. I'm so grateful for you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your very wonderful moderating skills and questions and introductions. Marissa, look, you don't have to wait 10, 15, 20 years. You're going to be running for office in like 5 years. If you don't want to, I think we're going to just put you there because you're an obvious leader. What we said in the beginning is, look, the youth will lead this. There's no question. With everything, it is the youth movement. Culturally, every change starts with the youth movement. I can't say that enough. We're here to empower. We might be in the positions, but there's no question who we're listening to. And we need to work together to make sure that we make some real change, and that as we're going through this paradigm shift, that we work together to make sure we settle into a place that's comfortable for all of us. So thank you, Marissa, for being here. Justin Hansford, you have a wealth of exposure and national understanding. You've been in the mix with some very unfortunate situations, but you've been able to work through and find the action item out of that. So I want us to continue to work together to figure out what we can do in this county, which does have some unique issues that need to be addressed. We're very curious about what this defunding means. It's a scary word, so the connotation might be something we need to clarify as we move forward, because there's no question we're going to have to start taking funds to go into more support for the people who live here. I want to thank Tim Adams. You're such a wonderful leader, a business leader, a man, just a wonderful man that I've known for a long time and appreciate greatly and love. But, wonderful that you stepped up. It's not like you needed to be mayor, but you recognized that there was a need as a business person, and in some of the places you sit, I think you recognize that even as successful as you are, the challenges that you have with some of the forces that fight against people of color in this county, which is the irony. But let's work together and get through that. Ed Burrows. Should I call you son because you're my mother's grandson? But listen, you are phenomenal. I love your passion, your fight, and your desire to collaborate. So let's continue to do that. And lastly, Aisha Braveboy, thank you so much. Our state's attorney. You take on a lot. This is you've been in various positions in leadership and on the state level and now on the local. I really want us to work together, specifically with looking at how we're going to have to work with our police force, and maybe even talk about getting some legislation where internal affairs is somewhat moved into the state's attorney's office. I think there needs to be some separation. I see too much time lingering with punishments, and I don't know where that lies, but I think that it would probably be a good move to make some changes. So we do have some actionable items, and we will be taking action. A lot will come out of this. I want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. We're going to do this again. I cannot sign off without thanking my team, who are absolutely awesome. Maurice Gibbs, thank you so much. Chris Valentine, Thank you, thank you. Keyshawn Washington, appreciate you. Gina Anderson Ford, thank you. Carla Cash, thank you, thank you. And Jennifer Jones, could not have done this without you, so thank you very much. I do want to say, as I like to wrap up, there are 3 things in life that I think are helpful to just keep in mind. Trust the process, stay faithful, and work your plan. And if you stick with those things, you will be successful. You will get to where you want to go. But just keep those things in mind. Trust the process, although it might be unappealing. Stay faithful and work your plan. Everything's going to work together for good. I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate those who joined us tonight, and we will be doing this again soon. We'd love your feedback. So continue to leave notes in the chat so that we can be responsive. And as we continue to set up a series of these moving forward summits, specifically summits on the state of humanity, and making sure that we move towards a humane society where there's equity for all of us. We need you. We need to do this together. We're all in this together. And God bless you. Be safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monique, so much. I wish that you could see all of the amazing things that people are thanking you for this panel, thanking you for this conversation. You have given them hope. They love that they are hearing from leaders ferociously. So I'm gonna wrap up and close us with asking each of our panel members to give me your power word or power statement. I live by 3 rules: that words have power, love is the most powerful force on the planet, and God is real. My power word is faith. Will, what's your power word?
We need transformation. Transformation.
Thank you. Marissa?
We need radical justice.
Radical justice. Thank you. Tim?
Racial equity.
Racial equity. What you started with, you end with. Thank you. Justin?
We need to defund the police.
Thank you. Defund the police. Justin, we had so many people asking you to change the word to reallocate, realign, reallocation movement. So we're going to find and make that happen. Ed, what's your power word? Thank you, Justin.
We are more than overcomers.
We are more than overcomers. State's Attorney Brave Boy.
Change will be tough. Change will be hard, but do it anyway.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Councilmember Monique Anderson Walker. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. And Monique, before we sign out, what is your power word?
Paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift. Thank you all so much. Have a blessed and wonderful evening. It has been awesome. Monique, I will be remembering, trust the process. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. And number 3.
Hey, and if I could say one last thing.
Yes.
And we've got to be willing to say it every day with no fear, and that is Black Lives Matter.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you all so much. Have a beautiful evening.
You too.